Scrooge McDuck sitting on all this gold, yeah,
Yeah, it's millions, but there are only 6 zeros there.
it's Ivan's fault or Peter's or whoever, right?
And make me $1 million there.
There's the Hippocratic Oath, and we have something like that too.
We don't do business with friends.
They simply stop being recognizable.
Every startup begins the same way. An idea, energy, a desire to grow fast. And it almost always seems that the main thing is the product, the market, and the first money. But at some point, something appears that no one even suspects at the beginning. Banks start asking questions, payments get delayed, and partners ask for documents. Investors look not only at growth, but also at the structure. And suddenly it becomes clear that you're not just building a product, you're entering a system where it's important not only how much you earn, but exactly how you do it. Today, we'll talk about how a startup turns into a company, and a company into a participant in the financial system, and why on this path, it's not just growth that matters, but also trust. Today, we're going to talk about this with Victoria Tsoy. She knows more about this than anyone could possibly know, but she prefers not to know. Hello, Victoria.
Hello, Mikhail. Thank you for the invitation. A broad, interesting topic for discussion today.
There's a long-term startup boom happening on the world stage, even on a regional level, one could say. And yes, of course, compared to 2023, it's not such a big surge, but nonetheless, more and more startups are forming, more and more teams dream of making their product and taking it global, so they can compete with the giants that have already completely captured the market, almost monopolists. But a question arises immediately. Their focus is primarily on speed. We want to do everything fast. We want to get as much money as possible. Make the first sales, and we'll think about the structure later. So, Victoria, my first question. How often do startups actually ignore compliance and other structures right at the start? How much of a headache is this really for you or for your industry as a whole?
Actually, at an early stage, almost everyone skips the compliance part because the focus is really on the product, on scaling quickly, on conquering the market fast. But unfortunately, without structuring, it's impossible. So, what is compliance in its most primal form? It's specifically about building a system. And no startup will be able to scale if there's no systematic approach. But as a rule, a system is always intimidating. I mean, they only think about it when it's already too late or when the first pain points appear.
And how much should one actually be afraid of compliance? Well, I know that many people, if you ask them right now, have you heard of compliance? Yes, I've heard of it. Have you gone through it? No, I'm afraid. What is it? I mean, it's something that, well, it's not really that scary of a thing, right?
No, actually, compliance is not a scary thing at all, especially if you build it into the business from the start, into the business model itself. Then it's a huge help. Compliance is a kind of lever that allows you to avoid mistakes, and it guides you in exactly the right direction. And if it works together at the initial stage, then the product scales really quickly and attracts investors really fast. If it's not there, you end up in a bit of a state of chaos. Consequently, you make more mistakes. Usually, a startup turns to compliance when they've already made mistakes, when they've already, let's say, gotten bogged down in certain things and now they need to do something. I mean, the team has already grown, money is flowing chaotically, but still, there's not enough, there are cash gaps, there are questions from regulatory bodies, and what to do. And at that moment, everyone remembers yes, we needed compliance.
And in general, how long can a startup survive in chaos? Let's say, yeah, they're just like you say, they don't comply, and they live in chaos. What's the time frame? What's the diagnosis? What diagnosis can they give? How long will it last?
Well, on average, it'll last no more than 1.5 years. That's the maximum period when you can still live in this state. of flow in the state of I came up with it, so it'll be, because in any case, the transition happens in stages. That is, step by step. The company strives for the product to be recognizable, for it to be stable already. And without that, stabilization won't happen. I mean, if you don't follow these basic safety rules, so to speak. So, compliance is a kind of internal, well, you could probably say like a fire extinguisher that prevents the company from making global mistakes. And if they don't listen to it, then in the end, they either reach a point where the product becomes uninteresting to the market or they simply lack the funds to scale. Because no investor will invest in a company where cash flows are unclear, where there's no transparency, where it's unclear where it's heading, and where an accounting system hasn't been built, including for money. I mean, accounting isn't just about money.
So, okay, they have a couple of years. Let's say their diagnosis is a couple of years. But what if it's a company, not a startup anymore, but a company? Say they've been around for a few years, things seemed fine, and then chaos breaks out. What's their timeline?
Chaos doesn't just start for them, they're basically living in that chaos already. Their deadline hits the moment they run out of their own working capital. I mean, sooner or later, every product reaches a point where it wants more of the market. To grow bigger, you need investment. And to get that investment, you need transparent reporting. You have to build a system where anyone wanting to put money into the company understands why, where, and how.
So the outcome's the same?
The outcome's the same either way, whether we're talking a year or 18 months, or an average of 3 to 5 years. But 5 is really the absolute limit. And that's assuming, yeah, the founder has some of their own funds to scale with. But the core idea of any startup is to create a product that can eventually be sold. So ultimately, product development and the compliance framework have to go hand in hand.
That's interesting because I've seen companies that, at least internally, seemed completely chaotic. It's unclear who's in charge, yet they're 20 or 30 years old, and I'm like, how did they survive? Is that just a fluke, or is their fate already sealed and they don't have much time left?
Most likely, there's a risk zone they just aren't highlighting. Even inside a large company, if you aren't an expert in that field, you won't spot the pain points right away.
At what point does a startup usually see, or rather realize, that they need to catch up?
That moment usually comes as a painful shock. It's when the team has scaled and you can't manage everything through a single chat anymore. When there are multiple stakeholders, money starts coming in, their eyes light up, they start spending chaotically, and eventually it's unclear who's paying taxes, where the team is headed, or who's setting tasks, and who's supposed to execute them. And that's when they start thinking about internal structuring. Because without structure, it's just a state of total chaos, both within the team and the company as a whole. And there have been cases where a product was really interesting and great, but they couldn't make the right decision at the right time, and the whole thing fell apart.
Well, let's say a product fails, they start looking for someone to blame, right? And the culprits in the first case are operations, but in the second, they say it's the ones who specifically monitored the taxes. What's the, let's say, right way to find who's at fault? Or should you even be looking for them at all? Well, business is business. We're all a team, so, well, so the team.
Is at fault? Well, to avoid looking for someone to blame, you need to delegate authority properly and exercise control.
Hmm? Yeah, okay.
Meaning, it's not just about handing out tasks, you also have to monitor those performing the tasks. That's a crucial factor.
And what exactly becomes that first signal that it's time for a business to grow up?
Actually, it's when the product becomes recognizable and when the headcount goes over 30 plus.
Can I ask, how old are you?
No, I mean the number, the staff size. At that point, you always have to realize that's it. We're no longer a startup. We absolutely have to create a structure.
I thought age. 30 years old. Well, if they're 25, they won't work for me.
No, about the staff, because 30 people is no longer the small business segment, and here there's a completely different approach, including, say, in terms of reporting, in terms of the tax burden, and so on. Here, it's already completely different stories in different amounts. And at this point, you really should start thinking because chaotic team growth without employment contracts, yeah, without some kind of social benefits, that's also a huge risk area. Because the project seems successful, but for example, they don't pay out salaries. According to the labor code, they don't pay out sick leave or social benefits, and they could just fall apart because of that too.
That's interesting. So, if a startup wants to have 100 people like on their books, is that already one of the mistakes?
I wouldn't say that it's exactly a mistake. They just need to implement a supervisory system right away.
So, without a system, well,
No, not without a system. It absolutely won't work without a system. Because the idea of startups is like we create a chat in some messenger, right? Doesn't matter if it's Telegram, WhatsApp, or whatever, like Max and so on, and that's it. And the task is set at the level of, well, I wrote it down. But then the question arises someone didn't hear, someone misunderstood, someone did it wrong, the product value drops, clients are lost, and there you go. A problem is created out of thin air.
so why is it then that very often, well, maybe not even why, but specifically, it's believed that money is the first point of conflict in teams in general, and then you have to deal with accounting, like once again?
Because money is the point where value, power, competence, and fairness all converge. I mean, as soon as money starts coming into a company, the first question is how to divide it up. For some, just earning is enough, for example, while others want to invest. Then again, what counts as an investment? Or are we just buying some fixed assets there? Like, cool laptops, tablets. We have constant team buildings. We're so interesting, developing corporate culture. But at the same time, we aren't investing in product development. And so money is always truly a stumbling block.
So you always have to maneuver, right? Like between this, just like with the tax rate in different countries, you have to also balance between the system, between the actual money being allocated, and between making the right decisions. In the product, again, keeping an eye on the product. So there are these four layers that we need to constantly, or is there something else, like something essential? Like, how could you forget about this?
No, well, it's just that where there's money, there's always accounting. I mean, in any case, yes, there must be accounting. Otherwise, you get cash gaps and certain troubles for the company. And precisely to prevent that from happening, you need to understand things at the very stage of formation. Well, roughly speaking, of course, you might not hire a CFO right away, but at the very least, yeah, an accountant or someone who just monitors the cash flow is a must.
And regarding the system, could we say that the system doesn't slow down the business, but rather tests it? Or would that not be entirely accurate?
To be honest, yes, it does slow it down. Because the system is exactly what exposes the weak spots. It highlights your pain points. And in some ways, yes, it creates obstacles, but these obstacles actually work for the benefit of the company's development. Because if a poor structure is built from the start, it will still slow things down regardless, no matter what kind it is.
There are so many startups nowadays, and you've seen quite a few, Victoria, that did everything right, maybe. Well, at least with the product, or, with growth. They grew, they made money, and then they just died because they didn't figure things out, for instance, or didn't do it in time. Yeah, and so could you tell us about a case like that from your experience where, well, I mean, we tried.
Actually, yes, there was a very interesting case. The product was very interesting for the market. I mean, it's even quite a social product optimization between pharmacies and consumers of medical drugs. Actually, the aggregator entered the market in a very interesting way, and basically, they were grand plans and scale. But at some point, yeah, things went wrong because as soon as a startup starts to mature, the visionary themselves must first realize that the world can't exist only in their head. Meaning it's about delegation, it's specifically about building a plan, building a framework, it's handing over certain areas of responsibility to more professional people in that regard. Because, well, like, relatively speaking, yeah, the IT guy, he handles the technical side, the accountant should handle the finances, the marketer handles the ads, and so on. So it's important to understand that. But the pain is that they don't know how to delegate. Handing over responsibility is always scary. So the question arises, do I even need this business? And how will this product develop without me? And that's exactly the situation that actually happened with that project.
Uh-huh. Well, let's assume, okay, they weren't thinking, right? Like, what happens when the system notices them? These kinds of products, these kinds of companies. What happens? Do they fall apart or what?
They simply stop being recognizable. And for aggregators, that's always probably the worst thing that can happen. You have no conversion, you have no responses, and consequently, no one is interested in you. And from there, no sales, no steady cash flow, and it slowly but surely goes under.
Well, okay. Let's say, suppose the founder, for the first time in his life, his payment gets stuck where the account is frozen. What does he usually think at that moment? I mean, is there some common practice? Again? And how much does he even understand what's going on? Without an accountant, well, we all understand. You can't be 100% genius in every niche, in every field at once, right? So, what happens at that moment?
Usually, they start asking the question, what did the finance department or accounting do wrong? Like, what happened? The question never occurs to them that, did we do the right thing? Did we miss certain deadlines, for reporting, for some currency transactions, and so on? So it always starts with searching for that, let's say, lower level, specifically who didn't complete the task, rather than the question that this was building up globally. There's never a freeze, some large scale audit, just because, well, one person didn't perform some transaction. That doesn't happen. The system works on a large scale.
And how often can you pinpoint exactly who's to blame? I mean, let's say a payment stops. It reaches the founder, and he is like, okay, Alana, your department is to blame. But that's not how it happens, right?
It doesn't actually happen that way if the founder understands that if the system isn't built or structured, I don't think he'd ask those questions.
So, in general, they'll find it faster.
He'll try to solve the problem, and only after it's solved, maybe look for someone to blame. But there's no point sitting there saying Elena's at fault, or Ivan, or Peter, or whoever, right? I mean, that doesn't solve the problem.
Well, okay. But if we look at the facts, let's be honest. Is compliance about protecting the business? Or is it a way for the system to control who gets access to money and who definitely doesn't? We just cast them aside and that's it.
Yes, it's a control system first and foremost. And compliance can, to some extent, slow down product development because it involves checking cash flows as well as vetting counterparties, who we'll work with and who we won't. And that's usually a major sticking point because the sales department wants to close 200 deals a month. They need to move fast. Compliance says, no, this is an unreliable partner. We can't work with them without risking our reputation. And that's where it can really slow things down.
Could you explain the terminology for our viewers and listeners, those watching or listening right now? Like what compliance and these counterparties are?
Yeah, of course. In simple terms, compliance is a system of checks and balances within a company. Essentially, it's like an internal officer who monitors what's right or wrong and identifies any risks. Counterparties are the partners we enter into relationships with specifically for business purposes. So they could be our customers or our suppliers of certain services.
So compliance is like KYC, but internally?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, I think everyone knows KYC.
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever had a client come to you and you looked at them, well, at them and their finances, and you were just horrified? Like right off the bat, oh no, no way. Not because they were, I don't know, shady or scary or had unpleasant faces, but because everything was a total mess. And you said, now look, even Einstein wouldn't understand what's going on here. I don't need this.
Actually, yes, there have been clients like that. And it always amazed me that despite all those red flags, when the situation was just dire, they sincerely believed everything was fine.
Even a therapist won't help.
Yeah, they just kept on doing what they were doing. Well, on one hand, you can admire that kind of persistence when someone believes in their product with such tenacity. But on the other hand, he knew he was digging himself deeper, that the money was going to the wrong place and the gaps were growing. But regardless, he flat out refused to listen to the fact that his system just wasn't working. And unfortunately, yeah, we had to turn that client away because you just can't explain things to someone if they don't want to hear it. Then again, when the team starts working, we'll find those exact pain points and we'll show you where your problems are. But as a rule, people don't really want to see or hear about that. They want an assistant who'll come in and say, "You're doing great, everything's awesome, I'm gonna make it all perfect for you." So,
Basically, you need a therapist everywhere to come in and say, I'll calm you down. Yes, it's millions. But there are only six zeros there.
wait,
And there could have been nine.
Pargo can't just vanish into thin air. There's no need to be nervous. It could burn, it could sink, or it could be stolen.
But just,
Like that, it's not going anywhere, so don't you worry.
we don't have hurricanes in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, something along those.
Lines. While you were talking, another unusual question came to mind. We all know the standard. Well, it's a simple example from real life, a standard situation. Say there are friends, or maybe not friends, who decide to start a business. And they think, okay, the business is doing well. And they think, now he'll hire me and give a $1 million salary. And then his girlfriend or someone else or more friends, $1 million for each of them or something like that. What are the risks here? I think our viewers would be very interested in that.
Well, first and foremost, it's risky because you'll end up with incompetent staff working for you, which will eventually put the company in the red. Because if a company can afford to pay $1 million, as you mentioned, even if it's just an example, then there must be a very rigorous approach to the team and to who works within it. That's a crucial factor. Because an unprofessional person, even a financier, let's say, yes, it happens when people claim they have all these credentials, I can do this, I can do that, and in the end, it turns out he can't defend a budget, he can't read a trial balance, he can't represent the company at tax hearings or other meetings. And over time, this simply leads to the company facing a bunch of unnecessary questions and problems out of nowhere.
So it turns into this massive financial bubble. It keeps going, growing, and growing, and then that's it.
Because you have to pay the person's salary on time.
Plus that 1 million.
Yes, and you have to pay taxes on it, which also puts a strain on the company. And in the end, we're basically just, well, throwing money away. So I really don't recommend that business owners hire these types of employees, relatives or friends. It's great if these people have the qualifications that you need. That's wonderful. But in reality, there aren't many of them.
So we don't do business with friends. Only if they have their business, we have ours, maybe just as supply deal at most.
You can do it, but you need compliance.
You need compliance.
You need to check for risks, first and foremost.
Now, about the nuances of that moment when things get really serious, right? Let's say there's a trader, for example, and he's making good money. Everything's fine. It's all legal, compliance, KYC. He pays his taxes. an ideal citizen, so to speak. And suddenly, he starts getting hassled by all these different agencies for documents, like a suspect. Did he actually break any rules then, or is that just how the system works? Just out of the blue, or is this all just talk, like bedtime horror stories?
No, this actually does happen. It's the reality as of today. And the issues here can be specifically within the framework of cross-border operations. That's where the MLRO probably steps in more because there are likely foreign exchange transactions, and any trader usually deals with currency.
Just so our viewers and listeners understand, the MLRO, could you explain? You mentioned compliance, but what about the MLRO?
An MLR is the person in a company whose job is specifically to check cross border deals, meaning currency operations, for their legality and for compliance with repatriation deadlines. So, what is a repatriation deadline line? It's when a currency operation occurs, it's regulated by the National Bank of the Republic of Kazakhstan, and there's a deadline by which you must provide a supporting document that the deal was completed to show you're not just moving funds around or laundering money.
So it turns out money can also have the status of a patriot, and
Repatriate. Quite so, yes.
interesting.
That's how it is, yes. But currently, the truth is, currency legislation has been tightened significantly. Well, again, due to certain restrictions with our specific, let's say, close partners and neighbors. So, yeah, I mean, the system is very transparent now because there's integration, first of all, and there's communication on an international level. So, all of this is tracked very quickly. It's very visible. It's no longer possible to like work in the gray area and keep it hidden. It just doesn't work that way anymore.
So the scenario where he didn't break any rules, but he's still a violator is real. I mean, it can happen.
Actually, it's impossible for someone to be held liable if they haven't violated anything at all.
Bonjour. So in any case, there's
Yes. If they're asking questions, there's likely some factor indicating that something was indeed violated.
but if he confirms that everything is fine with the documents and explains it all, then overall he's like,
There's also the point that the system itself might flag a violation. I mean, the scoring system just reads certain parameters as a risk zone.
uh-huh.
In reality, it might not even exist. So at that moment, a person's documents might actually be in order. Everything's fine. But let's say he uploaded some invoice and the invoice didn't show up in the second tier bag. This happens all the time. There are literally a million cases like this right now because the national bank tells the company you violated the rules, but the company didn't. They uploaded it through the bank client system. They uploaded
So who's to blame, man?
well, the executor is to blame, of course, that middleman specifically. Because, for instance, the company, as a taxpayer, they fulfilled their obligations, they uploaded it to the bank on time. But the bank didn't pass it on due to technical issues or the executor not reacting in time.
So it turns out the bank is the violator, not the person.
Well, the bank essentially waives these obligations. So they won't question the bank, they'll question the specific company that missed the deadline.
Is it? Interesting.
But of course, this can be proven. You can appeal by saying that we have confirmation that we actually did it. But nevertheless, the company will be the one with the problems.
There's always a risk zone.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Kazakhstan and Central Asia, yes, you do have international experience after all. Tell me honestly, if a company from Kazakhstan and a company, say, from somewhere else, for example, of a more Western nature, right, come to a bank with the same documents, they come together, they want to. Do they really go through the same process?
Yeah.
No, at all. So again, it seems there's a risk zone everywhere.
The requirements for companies with foreign participation that are non residents of the Republic of Kazakhstan are much stricter, with many more points they must comply with just to open a checking account. Currently, a number of banks in Kazakhstan categorically refuse to work with non residents. So it's simply to maintain the status that every bank has a correspondent bank when conducting foreign currency transactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this correspondent bank can refuse to work at any time. If, for example, a company that failed to meet some requirement somewhere else approaches you.
Let's say.
Yeah, they decided I'll go to Kazakhstan, open an account there, and start doing business.
Uh-huh. Well, for instance, someone in Armenia wanted to go to Kazakhstan.
It doesn't matter where.
Well, okay, let's take Zimbabwe.
Yes,
Someone from Zimbabwe. So he arrives, and it won't happen right away.
it won't happen right away.
There's KYC and compliance.
Yes, he'll have to go through a specific review process, possibly with additional inquiries. Currently, opening accounts for non residents takes over a month. So you can't just show up and open one in a single day.
Well, there's the stumbling block.
Well, actually, it's a kind of protection. I wouldn't call it a stumbling block. It's probably more to weed out unscrupulous companies that think, well, Kazakhstan and Asia in general aren't as, say, developed as London or Silicon Valley, and that they can just come here and do whatever. No, it doesn't work like that.
Is there any visible progress, in your professional opinion, that there's growth and development specifically in Central Asia? If we look only at Central Asia, is banking really progressing? Is digitalization happening? Are some things becoming simpler while others, well, could be better, but overall, is there some growth?
Definitely.
Uh-huh.
There is positive momentum.
Uh-huh.
Because this region is developing very rapidly right now. Actually, Kazakhstan and Central Asia as a whole. Plus, there's support in terms of opening special economic zones. As you know, we have the International IT Park, Astana Hub, and the Astana International Financial Center. These are zones where, in principle, there are preferential conditions even for non residents. Also, right now, literally with our neighbors in Bishkek, a similar zone will soon be organized there as well.
In Bishkek too? I heard about Tashkent, for example.
Now it's already in Bishkek. Tashkent is still just a project.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a project, they haven't launched it yet. But in Bishkek, it's definite. We already know the rates, we know what the preferences will be, and what conditions must be met to benefit from them.
And Alito is also being planned, right?
Alatau is still in its infancy. It's planned, yes, but it's actually a very long term project, and it's unclear whether the same benefits as in Astana Hub will apply or not. Then again, Astana Hub is tightening its requirements more and more. The monitoring service isn't sleeping. They're now very carefully checking how well you match the priority activity type and whether you're eligible for benefits. Moreover, if you're excluded, they can retroactively charge you all the taxes you saved.
Well, all right, but in this area, can we see any kind of progression? If we don't look at Central Asia as a whole, the entire region, right? But let's say specifically the main ones, Astana Hub, AIFC, are there any shifts there compared to, I don't know, 3 years ago or so?
Definitely, definitely, yes. The trend is very positive, actually, yeah. If you comply, if you meet the requirements, then it's very comfortable to work. Another thing is, again, compliance and meeting requirements. Many don't understand how it works from the inside.
And what's the difference?
The difference is that, well, let's say there's this concept, of running a business on the fly. Meaning, when you don't have a built system, when you don't have a scheme, when your contracts are just created by ChatGPT. And you don't really check them, so to speak, and it's great. You're making money, everything's working. In their jurisdiction, it doesn't work like that. So you really need an in-house lawyer there to draft contracts, who will take into account that it's English law and so on. Things like that. Again, this goes back to needing professionals on the team, each in their own area of responsibility. That's when you can comply, because you simply, well, you can't do it all alone.
Again, there's this moment, like a specific moment. If you want, you can even give it some terminology, right? Let's imagine when you look at a business and realize that this guy is still playing startup, Or this girl is, well, imagining herself as one. But this one is already building a company, for instance. What is that moment? Is it designated somehow? Like, for example, day X, hour X? Maybe it's related to math or.
No, it's more about probably the existence of a company's accounting policy. Meaning, there are companies that come to us, again, for an opinion. We just ask a question. Do you have an accounting policy? Do you have clear regulations written out?
The person says, "What's that?" And you're like, "That's it. He's a bad person."
Well, no, he might not actually be a bad person, but it already shows that he doesn't understand how to build a structure.
And in that case, it turns out either you help him build the structure or he has to figure it out himself, right? Or is there some third way?
Well, actually, you can always help. Even if a person doesn't understand, you can give them advice. So, our case isn't about just saying, sorry, you're not a fit for us, or sorry, we can't help you. In any case, we can always help.
Because Astana Hub might say to, okay,
Well, we're just experts in this. So basically, from the very beginning, when the hub was organized, we've been part of it, constantly participating in all these sessions and consultations. So you can always give advice. Another thing is, if you've given advice, set up the system, the person paid a certain amount, but they don't follow those rules. So he has,
then what do you do?
well, unfortunately, nothing, because we gave him a roadmap and he's just not following it.
You don't slap their hands. Well, we gave him the mat.
No, well, it's everyone's own responsibility here.
It's just that, well, however they manage, they manage.
Yes, I mean, we will, of course, if the person stays for support, we'll highlight things. We'll say, yes, right here, you might have some violations. But sometimes it's just a one time consultation, and he thinks they've drawn up a plan for me, I'll go do it, and it'll be great.
Business.
Yeah.
But the business isn't quite, well, we gave you the map, but you also need to know how to read the map. You can't find your way, you're just not a navigator in life.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about investments? Suppose an investor looks at financial statements, suppose he's smart, let's say, educated, and understands the subject. So he looks at a startup's reports, the startup wants the investor to actually put in the money. What does he really see? And what does the founder think he sees? Are these completely different things or is it the same? And in general, is it the same thing? I mean, they show him some documents, and in theory, it all relates to this startup, right?
Well, most likely, it's about whether you can hide a weak structure with pretty numbers.
Is that possible?
Temporarily, yes.
Temporarily.
It's possible temporarily because you can, say, sugarcoat certain parameters, but the system will fail. That's for sure.
And what's the time frame then? Again, what's the diagnosis, doctor?
Actually, if it's a more or less savvy investor, he'll check anyway. And any auditor or even a somewhat professional accountant will immediately spot the discrepancies.
So it's a matter of a couple of days. So today,
Well, yes, you could say that.
while they're asking, persuading him, they can make it look nice, but tomorrow he.
No, they can provide financial statements showing that everything is just great. But there's a parameter like the breakdown of financial statements. And a more or less savvy accountant, or especially a financial expert of some kind, will see the whole, as they say, inside story of the company from that breakdown. You can't hide it there. Yeah.
And, well, suppose they saw this, right? Is this punished somehow, or.
No, actually, it's the company's responsibility how to keep records, or whether to keep them at all. So, like, there's no strictly defined regulation here. I mean, yes, the tax code says you must maintain an accounting system, but then again, using basic Excel, using 1C, using SAP or whatever, that's your own business. The main thing is that there are records so that when you're asked questions, you can answer them and accordingly show numbers that add up.
If you're working with anti money laundering reporting, Victoria, have you ever had a moment where, well, you had to tell a business, stop, we're not doing this deal. We're just not doing it. And that's it. We're not doing it. And no matter how you try to persuade us, we won't go through with it. That's it. Doors closed. I'm not letting you in. And it actually costs the company money, and so the company ends up losing some money, some funds, well, because it's their own fault. What does that look like from the inside, from your personal experience?
Actually, we don't just have the power to stop a deal like that. What's more, as part of our professional ethics, we're required to report to the regulatory body that such a deal is being conducted or is planned to be conducted. Because we are all certified specialists. Just like there's the Hippocratic Oath, we also have a kind of similar.
Story, like I said, a doctor.
Yes, so we're obligated to report such transactions. Because if such a report is issued and it has, let's say, the signature of an expert who let it through, that expert could lose their license.
And then do they have a chance to get it back, or is that it?
Yes, but it's very difficult, and no expert would risk it for any company because getting that license takes years. I mean, it's not like you just finish some course and get the license. No, actually, you have to meet professional standards, have experience, and go through certain steps.
So basically, they go back to square one and have to go through the whole.
Yes, but if you're removed from the registry, it's very hard to get back in later. It's possible, but difficult. In fact, I don't know anyone among my colleagues who has actually returned. There are those who were excluded, but they didn't even make an attempt to come back. So, if we see such a violation by a company, then no, absolutely not.
You won't pass.
Well, it's basically akin to criminality, so there could even be criminal liability for putting your signature on it.
Better to be safe, better to double check.
Yes, if there are doubts, it's better to start an extra check, make certain inquiries to the regulatory bodies, and basically protect your good name.
And in any case, if they confirm that no, everything's fine, then it'll go through. If not, well, then it's their own fault. So that's interesting.
Well, it's very rare for companies to openly violate and then seek an expert opinion. Because, as a rule, of course, the gray market still exists. It exists, it has existed, and it'll probably exist for another 100 years. They just live in their own environment and usually rarely reach the level of this kind of expertise because they know they could be exposed immediately.
So a trader is choosing a platform. He wants to, well, start trading. He looks at the commissions, the interface, and the tools. But what does he look at or fail to look at and then regret? There must be one or two things that everyone ignores, right? I mean, if I, as a potential trader, want to learn about a platform, I need to be sure it's reliable, right? So there must be some nuances here as well.
Yes, actually, there are three key parameters. They are financial security, stability, and the overall time a platform has been on the market. Because nowadays, there are many schemes that create fly by night platforms, lure people in with high rates, and promise that almost every trade will bring like a 10x return from day one. And people go for it.
Uh huh.
The thirst for easy money is still very real. So you have to check, including consulting with specialists, because an average user can't always tell if a platform is legit or a fake.
Uh-huh. So that's exactly what compliance is for, right?
That's part of it. Yeah, that's part of it too.
It helps us out here.
Well, it helps, but usually that's a slightly different segment. I mean, that's where more of the fintech side of things comes in?
As far as we and our listeners know, there's also categorization.
Yes.
It's not just random. So in this case, we have certain ways, at least in Kazakhstan, we have ways.
There's a registry, an official registry, yes. So you can check for compliance to see if the company is in that registry or not. Check its ratings. Again, every company has its own ratings because they make mistakes too. And for certain violations, their category rating is simply lowered, you see? And the lower the category, the lower the rating, the less safe it is to invest money in that company.
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, basically, most of them are insured, of course. So even if you lose money, they'll pay you back after a few years. Just recently, there was a case. It was quite surprising. An insurance company called and said, "There was this company. Do you remember it?" And we were like, "Yes, we remember." Well, we're ready to pay you out.
You mean after all these years?
About 8 years have passed. If you still have the documents proving that you actually invested and didn't receive payments, and since the company was declared a pyramid scheme, we're ready to reimburse you.
Wait, is that even possible?
Yes, I was genuinely surprised too. And actually, I didn't even believe it was true at first, but yes,
So a person thinks that their money is their money. But at what point does this person realize that's not quite the case? There's a standard, let's say, understanding that no. Or yes? How can this be philosophically distinguished from your field's perspective?
it's probably more a question about who actually owns the money, in this world. Well, I think that money is likely managed and owned by more than one financial institution. But can one exist separately? And think, this is only my money, and I'm just, well, like Scrooge McDuck sitting on his gold, right? And not making any claims? In part, perhaps you can, but a number of points must be observed. That is, it must be, of course, financial literacy, it must be some kind of capital that always brings an income, but nevertheless, you won't be able to separate yourself completely in this ecosystem. In any case, no matter how independent you are, you'll still have to come into contact with the outside world, and the outside world dictates the general rules of interaction with finances. Therefore, most likely, just mine is mine and yours is yours, well, it probably doesn't work that way.
And it's all because a person is an individual, as they say in school textbooks.
Yes.
Society must.
The.
Yes.
That's because, yes, because everyone wants to, but not everyone can.
Now, if you were asked to say one thing to a founder or a trader who is currently growing rapidly, like just, well, incredibly, like he's taken off all right, that's it, almost all the way to Jupiter, and thinks everything is under control, what would it be?
Actually, that's probably a very great question. Here, I'll touch on one of my favorite, probably, recommendations. First of all, working based on "I feel this way and it's cool," that doesn't work, even if they're flying into space, even if they're scaling up in giant steps. And simply, accounting. The simplest, most ordinary accounting will help to at least restrain this fervor, because where there's giant scaling, there are giant mistakes, as a rule.
And it becomes uncontrollable. It turns out.
Well, why? It's possible if, again, you approach it correctly.
But only carefully.
Yes, yes.
Why is accounting not just bookkeeping in our usual sense, but a part of trust? So, where is the truth?
Actually, accounting's not just a technical function of counting money or some banal operations. Accounting is precisely the language the company speaks. And accounting isn't about what might happen to us in the future. It's about what we have right now, how our financial affairs are doing, how stable we are, and how confident we feel about tomorrow. Because accounting provides answers to a number of questions that are vital for business. It's cash flows, it's data quality, it is, roughly speaking, the heart of the company. So, well, in fact, trust is very important here. Because if there's no trust, the numbers will be chaotic, there'll be contradictions, non compliance with standards and rules, and everything will fall apart again.
But when does a company actually need an MLRO? Like, when is it really necessary?
Most likely at the moment when a company decides to engage in foreign economic activity.
So, without one, if I want to trade with Morocco,
You can.
is it mandatory?
You can just reach out to consultants. I mean, some companies can't afford to have an MLRO on staff at the initial stage because it's a fairly high paying position. But you can reach out just for a consultation to show them your contract. An expert will give you an assessment, a conclusion, and you act within that framework.
So if I reach out to an MLRO in, say, Morocco, that would be.
Why not? You can.
Is it mandatory I do it in Kazakhstan?
Yeah, it's likely better to reach out in the country where you plan to do business because the laws are different anyway.
Uh huh. Yeah. Continuing with the theme of the question about Kazakhstan and Central Asia, and in general, a unique path, right? Isolated, one might even say. The global market has always had completely different conditions for different companies from different countries and continents. And companies from the region, they often undergo more and more. And let's say, with each year and each new policy change in a given state, more and more audits, not because of poor quality, but because of perception as it changes, and trends change too. So, what difficulties do startups, specifically from Kazakhstan, face most often, Victoria?
Well, in fact, startups from Kazakhstan usually face the same mistakes, the same difficulties. Not even mistakes, I would say probably more like difficulties. Because there are few successful cases from our market that have proven themselves, say, in the European market, somewhere in Delaware, London, or on some Berlin exchanges. There's a very low percentage of positive cases, so there's no trust map. And as a rule, foreign investors always rely specifically on certain key trust factors of the very ecosystem where they're used to seeing it. And that's why our startups are usually forced to register in another jurisdiction. They choose either some venture funds there or something else. They set up a scheme where the parent company will be a company located in Delaware. The operator will be located in Kazakhstan, relatively speaking. But on the other hand, the product will be more recognizable, more scalable, and will attract many times more attention. So, for our startups, specifically from the Kazakhstani market, since the market is limited, they don't just have to show the product, they also have to prove that this market is actually worth attention. And this complicates the task many times over, specifically in terms of scale and overall recognition.
Well, does it then create the feeling that trust in the regions is distributed, well, completely unevenly?
Yes.
If we're saying they want Delaware there, or what else, New Jersey, I remember there are other zones. So, well, to go there instead of staying here?
Yes, they go there because Kazakhstan is off the mental map of the trust zone, so to speak. The jurisdiction is clear to them there. It's clear how to protect your rights there. It's clear how this system works from the inside. So, of course, yes. That is, if you choose, let's say between investing in what's clear and investing in what changes every day. And if you take into account the trend of how our legislation changes, how our main regulatory documents change, Kazakhstan is one of the most, let's say, in quotes, dynamically developing countries in this regard, where regulations change at the speed of light. No other country can boast of that.
Well, we can.
Well, actually, I wouldn't say that's a plus. Because for any regulatory act to actually prove its right to exist, it takes at least 15 to 20 years. And to work through a series of cases specifically within the framework of that legal norm.
And what's the average now? How many years? Or days?
Yes, most likely. I'd probably say days too, because there are documents that don't even last a year. A trial begins, the defense of a right starts based on one document, and in the process, it can simply be annulled, which is just, wow, extraordinary. Because if you're making claims under one regulatory act, you can't annul it until the process is over. But there really was a case like that, and we actually had to reapply because the court denied the claim simply because that specific regulation was no longer in effect.
And what do you do in a case like that?
You reapply, file the claim again, and this time you cite the regulation that's currently in force.
And in this field, what becomes the main thing, the biggest barrier, you might even say? Banks, jurisdictions, or is it just perception? Which of these three aspects is the most, pressing issue?
I'd say it's probably more about the jurisdiction, mostly.
Jurisdiction, right? Mm-hmm.
Because, as a rule, the deal breaker is always the jurisdiction where the company is actually registered.
And in your experience, what are the, let's say, top three jurisdictions that you most often, well, I don't know, see with clients or just in your practice in general? Not necessarily meaning this one's perfect for startups and that one's for something else, but just, the ones you hear about most often, like this, and this.
If we're talking about Kazakhstan, then of course it's the AIFC and Astana Hub. That's just what we happen to specialize in. Looking at it more broadly, it's usually the Dubai free zones and often Delaware as well.
Delaware, USA.
Yes, anywhere really that has some kind of special economic zones.
What about, say, Macau or China?
No, we actually rarely see cases like that. Maybe it's because of the region, or perhaps they just try to handle it themselves within their own domestic market.
So it's either the East or the West. That's it. Those are the two paths.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's how it's split up, yeah. Usually, those are the kinds of clients who come to us.
Every startup dreams of growing big, but growth isn't just about more clients and more money, it brings more questions, more responsibility, and more scrutiny from the system itself. At some point, it becomes clear that the market isn't just about opportunities, it's also about conditions. And perhaps the most important shift any business must make in this situation is to stop thinking about how to make more money and start understanding how to operate in a way that ensures people continue to trust you. Victoria, thank you so much for such a comprehensive dialogue that our viewers and listeners had the chance to hear today.
Mikhail, thank you for having me. It was a very interesting conversation. I hope that our listeners and viewers will find this information very useful.
This has been the xChief Central Asia podcast. Perhaps the most important question you should ask yourself is, are you building a business or are you building access to the system where it can actually exist? I'm Mikhail. Thanks for joining us. See you in the next episodes. Subscribe and leave your comments. Give us a like. If you have any questions, we'll try to answer them.